Hayden and I are back for another episode of Unscripted Exchanges. If you can hear in the background, we actually have an unbelievable guest on today. We're really excited. So I'm going to go ahead and introduce Joe Mayernick. Joe is the executive chairman. And Joe, please feel free to chime in and tell me if I'm misspeaking, but the executive chairman of Prodigo Solutions, the CEO of Sonoma Holdings, and was recently inducted into the Greater Cincinnati Hall of Fame Laureate for his business acumen and just overall impact he's had on the community and businesses around the Cincinnati area and around the world. So super excited to have you on here today, Joe.
Well, thank you for having me.
Awesome. So, Joe, we've got a list of pretty good questions to kind of start some topics. Watch that video of your induction into the Cincinnati Hall of Fame, which is just unbelievable. That's an unbelievable accolade to add to your, I'm sure, repertoire of awards and stuff. And kind of one of the things I wanted to first ask you, because that was kind of a hot topic for us, is what did winning that award mean to you?
Initially, I didn't think much of it when they called me up to let me know that I was being awarded that honor. But the more that I looked at the former inductees that have been included into that Hall of Fame, the Laureate program, and the awards dinner. Actually, I didn't have a speech for it. I'm giving you a long answer here. There were 500 people there. And I looked around the crowd. I didn't have a speech. And it was all about achievement. And it struck me in looking at the participants there, 500 people and the usual faces. When I got up, it meant quite a bit to me, because when I went up to give my speech, it was probably the briefest speech in the history of that event. They actually told me it was 92 seconds long.
Okay.
Short and sweet.
Yeah, and what it meant to me, and I'm getting to that point, is when I got up, I said, I wanted to thank Junior Achievement, so forth and so on, but we live in the greatest country in the world, and because of that country, we have had the opportunity and privilege to achieve, regardless of where we come from and who we are. And once we have that opportunity and privilege to achieve, then we have the privilege and opportunity to share that achievement, whether it's emotional, physical, or financial, with other people. And as I look around the room, I would like you all to stand up, take a look at each person at the table, and take a look at the tables around you, because we happen to be in one of the most giving cities in America, in the most giving country, and every one of you has achieved to be giving back. So I'd like you to join me in putting our hands together and applauding each and every one of you for your achievements and what you've done in giving back. And that was it.
Okay.
So when you take the sum total of that, it was a privilege to be involved with people and to be honored, I guess, or recognized for your achievements. But in reality, everybody there had achieved, and everybody there continues to give back. So that's what it meant to me. That was the takeaway.
Well, so
and,
God. Well, I was going to say, like, one of the things, that stuck out to me, Joe, from knowing you, back when I was starting my first technology company, Parity Water, it was, the pool monitor, then the aquaculture. And one of the things that stuck out to me, and even the fact that you're doing this podcast with us, was your willingness to provide your time to people. And time is a big asset. I think the older you get, the more you recognize how important your time is and how valuable it is. And, just kind of hearing you talk about this achievement, and you're like, it was whatever at first to me. And then you kind of recognize that it was cool that we could be here and celebrate together what we've achieved. It's a very much not a this is all about me and this is all about Joe, but this is all about our city and what we're doing for people. And I can tell you, like, as a local Cincinnatian and a patriot, a lover of the greatest state, greatest country in the world, that's awesome to hear. And it sounds like, you've been there, done that, but you're not saying, hey, look at me, but hey, look at what we've done as a country and what we've done in this in this small group that was at this event. So that's really neat to hear.
Yeah, it's never about an individual. It's always about the people and your ability to have the opportunity to interact with people to make a difference. Um, I happen to, here's a quick anecdotal story for you. I happen to, and I'm not going to mention names, but you'll probably figure it out. I happened to meet some folks, um, two of the smarter guys in the financial world on the planet at Pebble Beach playing golf, and they had taken an interest in one of my companies. And they became, to me, to use their terms, unofficial financial advisors to me. And they had helped me out significantly in about a 5-6 year period and had mentored me. And I sold that company for right at $250 million.
Wow.
And they called me after it was announced in the Wall Street Journal. I got off a plane in Phoenix, and my phone rang, and it was the one gentleman. He said, "I'm going to put George on the phone here." And they said, "We want to congratulate you on what you've accomplished." And I said, "Well, thank you very much." And they said, "We'd like to have dinner with you the next time you're out here in California." And I said, "I'd be happy to." They said, "Well, now you've achieved a certain position of wealth and would like to sit down and talk to you about it." And me being a fool, I said, "Oh, you want me to invest in your fund?" And they go, "Absolutely not." I said, "Okay, let's have dinner." And I sat at the dinner table and I thanked them profusely for what they had done for me, helped me with. And I said, "How can I pay you back?" Now, these are two billionaires.
Okay, yeah, they're super up there, right?
Right. Okay. Actually, multi-billionaires. And they looked at me and said, "Well, you're going to have a lot of institutions coming to you that want to leverage your financial gains. You're going to have a lot of people approach you. And here's the two things you can do for us. Don't change who you are and how you got there." I said, "Well, that's pretty simple."
Right.
Love that.
I said, "Well, it's not as simple as you think."
Mm-hmm.
And I said, "Okay." And they said, "The second thing is, pay us back. We want you to be open and able to listen to people who come to you with their ideas, their concepts, and listen to them and give them advice and direction that's unvarnished, help them where they need help, and share your time, your knowledge with other people that could be emotional, intellectual, or financial. but take the time to listen. Because remember, you were one of those people a while back. And if you'll remember who we are and what we shared with you years ago, we were those people way back when. So it was very eye-opening. And to your point, time is the most precious commodity we have in life. The reason for that is we don't know how much time we have. And the ability to share that time and listen and be able to be supportive, give direction, and is, I think, very valuable in building out your own character, your own integrity to help other people. And it's never about you as an individual. I see some of those people in business, they don't last long. It's more about, it's always a team environment, always. There's only two ingredients in a company, as you heard me say in that interview, people and money. And we could put $20-50 million on the table. It doesn't matter. It's not going to do anything. It's just money. But we come up with a vision, a concept, an idea, put together a strategy, hire people, and then we work to implement that strategy. And we have an opportunity to lose that money or make it grow. So the most important asset any organization has are its people. And it's important that you take the time to meet people, listen to them, and surround yourself with very good people.
I love that that message and that story. I appreciate you sharing that, Joe. It sounds like, or at least one of the many takeaways, because you shared quite a few there, is to kind of pay it forward and kind of help the next generation as well, was one feedback that you had received there, which is awesome, because you have to remember where you came from. We all start somewhere, and it's always nice to be humble and kind of listen to, some up and coming ideas. So I know we talked offline, but we're super appreciative and thankful that you're giving your time to us here today. I've got a few questions real quick. One, which should be a pretty simple one. I know you're a golfer. I just want to know what your best round of golf is.
My best round ever?
Yeah. And it can have an asterisk next to it.
From a scoring point of view, I shot a 68 at Pebble Beach.
Wow.
That's 4 back operations ago. From a enjoyment point of view, that would be tough to ascertain because we have a golf tournament. I have a golf tournament at Pebble Beach. It'll be 25 years this January. It's the only private golf tournament at Pebble Beach. And we have a motto there. I have 80 of my friends from around the world come. We spend a week there. We play 3 tournament rounds at Pebble and 1 at Spyglass. And our motto is, it's not the grass you walk. And obviously, that's some of the finest golf grass in the world. But it's not the grass you walk, it's who you walk the grass with. And again, it comes back to the same subject we talked about for the last 15 minutes, and it's people. So I can put a finger on my best score. But I can't put a hand on my most favorable run because the people are dynamic, and it's always changing every time you go out there, and it's a great 4 hours to spend with people. You could have a great time at Hackers Hollow if you have the right 3 other people with you.
Totally.
So that's my answer to you.
Yeah, I mean, I knew you would kick my ass, but I didn't know how badly you would kick my ass if we went out. I think many, many years ago, you probably don't know this, but I think I might have caddied for you like 15 plus years ago at a local country club. I don't know. It's been a minute.
Coldstream?
Yeah, I wasn't going to name drop the club, but yeah. Yeah. I used to be a caddy back in the day. I'm a terrible golfer, though. I'd be lucky to break 85 on a good day.
That's not too bad.
No, you got to start somewhere, right? I just got to get out there more consistently. But anyhow, more of a business related question. Cole and I have started companies. Success is relative, or yeah, we are always trying to learn. We want to start future companies together. But the question that I'm trying to ask here, and it's not necessarily a binary question, but it's going to come off as a binary yes or no. Do you think it's easier to start a company in today's environment versus, 10, 20, 30 years ago?
I don't think the dynamics have changed at all.
Mm-hmm.
Statistically that, I guess the last source of truth I looked at was 1919. I believe it was Deloitte that 92% of the companies that start in this country go out of business within 3 years.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a real reason for that. The basic principles of building a business are, they don't change.
Mm-hmm.
You have a product or a technology, you believe it can make a difference. And then if you're smart, you take a look at what you believe the impact of that product or technology will be, and then you put it off on the side. And then you say, okay, what's the market opportunity for that product or technology? What's the competitive landscape today? What type of advantage will I be bringing to the market relative to what exists today?
Mm-hmm.
Is my objective to, at the end of the day, and this is where most people fall short, is my objective to sell this company? Is my objective to build this company out and continue to make money and run it? What are my end goal objectives in starting this company? Where do I want to be? And then you work backwards. And once you do that, then you figure out, remember, 2 ingredients, people and money. The first ingredient you have to have is you already have the idea and concept with a couple of people, you and your partner.
Mm-hmm.
And then you have to get the money. And most people undercapitalize. Most people starting a company try to put a high valuation on their company so they don't have to give away as much stock. Totally ridiculous. Should be done the opposite way. You should try to value your company as low as you can. And if you have the proper amount of access to money, the right kind of business plan, you don't have to go out for additional second and third rounds of financing where you're devaluating your company because you haven't met your goals.
Okay.
So the pre-planning is extremely important.
Mm-hmm.
And most people fall in love with the product or the technology and have a rush to market. And that's a problem, and that's been a problem forever. I mean, you can look back on businesses that have started and failed and why. And then you can take a look at entrepreneurs that started, failed, took a second and third opportunity, and generally by the third time they do it, they start to get it right because if they're smart, they learn from their mistakes. So I don't think there's any difference based on the economic conditions of when to start a company. Again, it has to do with the viability of your product or service and the ability to look at the end game and work backwards to figure out your market opportunity, who will buy your company, who the strategic buyers would be, and then how much money you'll need. And then once you understand how much money you'll need, then you have to figure out where you're going to go get that money.
Mm-hmm.
And that's a really important and critical area. And most places that are early stage have to get money from high net worth individuals because angel groups, even VCs have a small limited or a floor of what they're willing to invest. And so you're dealing with high net worth individuals. And if you're older and you tell them, here's my plan, and my plan is to build it and sell it, and here's who I plan to sell it to as a strategic, they understand that. Or if you're younger, like you fellas, you have to be able to show them if they put in a dollar, how they're going to get their dollar back and what their upside potential is. And I believe you guys are in your maybe late 20s, early to mid 30s.
Late 20s, yep.
Okay. If I'm looking at a fellow who's looking for an investment and he's in his late 20s, early 30s, I don't expect he's going to build that company to sell it. I expect he's going to be committed and he's going to build that company to make it profitable and continue to build it because he has a lot of runway chronologically.
Right.
And if that's the case, then he has to be able to show the investor at a certain point in time in the future, and if you're following your business plan, how you're going to do a valuation and pay dividends back out to these investors and or potentially buy them out. And because most investors, gentlemen, that have high net worth are mostly in their lower expense life cycle curves, which means they're generally in their mid 50s and older. And most are really in their 60s where they have disposable liquid equity to write a check for, $500,000, $1 million. And they know that their time on the planet is not going to be, it's a diminishing number
right.
from the time you're 50. So they want to understand how they're going to get their dollar back and what's the upside going to be. And if it's a guy that has a history of buying, building, and selling companies like I do, they know that here's the horizon and here's who he's probably going to sell it to and here's what the multiples look like. So that's what they make their conscious decision on. When they look at guys like you, they think, well, they're probably not going to sell the company. They'll probably want to build it and continue to build it. So how am I going to get my money out? And that's where you have to figure out in your private placement memorandum how you're going to unlock their value for them other than selling the company.
Okay, so I've got a question specific to that, Joe, as you're talking about it, because that intrigues me, and I think you've kind of shared some of this with me before, over our conversations. And one of the questions I'd have for you is like, as you just stated, you've invested and started multiple companies and exited them. As put yourself in the investor's shoes, which you already are. What do you look for? Like, are you more interested, or does it scare you more when you look at younger entrepreneurs that you're looking at that don't necessarily want to exit? Is that a turnoff for you? Or is it more of like a just show me how?
It's just show me how.
Okay.
I think when you look at more seasoned, take a look at me. I mean, what am I now? 74. Okay, I flunked retirement 3 times, and I'm back at the game, buying more companies, building them up, and selling them. I'm getting ready to sell 2 of the companies here in the next 6 to 9 months that we have that I'm running, and my investors know that, and their question with a more seasoned, or I'll term to be an older guy, is how much energy does he have? How much gas does he have in the tank to really drive this? And what are his motivations to do it? If he's already made a lot of money, why is he doing it? And you have to be able to answer those questions. In my case, I think business is the greatest game ever invented in the planet. And why is that? It's like no other game. In any other game, say physical sports, you blow out a knee, you hurt your shoulder, you're done. Your body can only last so long. In business, your mind can get better with every deal you do, and you can learn more. You can be more focused. You can have a greater holistic view based on your past experiences, and you can play that game of business until they throw you in the dirt. And it's something that is motivating to me personally, and I personally really enjoy and wouldn't know what else I'd do. You can only play golf so many days a week. You can only shoot so much. You can only go on a boat. And you have to keep your mind active. So that's the older side. The younger side, I like the energy in younger people. What I find them to be obviously lacking, as opposed to the more seasoned person, is they haven't, their foresight vision is not based on the rear view mirror. It's based strictly on the windshield. And that's problematic in a way because of the lack of experience and the lack of challenges that you've faced and overcome. However, that being said, if they get the right investor group and they get the right board who can help them from a fostering point of view and a mentoring point of view, and they're willing to listen, I think young people have a huge opportunity in what's playing out in the global environment, certainly in sectors in technology, things that I would say more seasoned investors are not very well versed in, myself being one. Younger people have more of a technology environment, and therefore they're better seasoned to deal with today's challenges and opportunities, as opposed to people that aren't in that mainstream. And so I believe younger people with the right product or service and the right mentality, the mentality of, I believe in what I have, but I'm here to learn about what I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
And I must meet on a monthly basis about, I'd say, 6 to 8 companies who are interested in investing or seeking advice. And when I can find somebody who is younger, who is focused and energetic, who has a broader idea of the market they're dealing with and how to build a company to get its value, I'm generally much more interested in that than somebody who's very seasoned.
Okay.
Because I think I can help them more than I can a seasoned guy. Okay.
So you feel like you could add more value to that and help get it there versus somebody that says, I already know the game, I've been there, done that. Right? You're like, well, then what value other than money do I bring to you?
You hit it right on the head. Okay. And there's the self-serving reason for that. Money is money,
mm-hmm.
And after a while, that's all it is. But to be able to look yourself in the mirror and say, you know something, I helped with this individual's progress, not success. Success is an ending word, but helped with their progress. And that means more to me than getting a big paycheck. I already have the big paycheck.
you already got that.
So, yeah. So, how do you, to use your term, how do you pay it forward? And it's a lot easier to do with younger people than it is with more seasoned people.
That's amazing. We're kind of speechless over here, digesting your insights that you're sharing here. So one other question here. You mentioned food, garbage, medicine, and death are the 4 recession-proof industries. if you had to do it all over again, because I think you've got a successful track record in both garbage or waste and medicine, would you look at a different industry outside of those four, or would you still stay involved in one of those four?
I'd still stay in those areas because they are the most relevant to the human life cycle. It's like I said, my mentor told me, he said, once a person's born, they have to eat.
Mm-hmm.
They will make trash, whether they like it or not. They're going to get sick, whether they like it or not, and they're going to die. And the most closely related industries to that, out of necessity, are the food, garbage, medicine, and death. I think there is significant upside opportunity in the healthcare industry.
Mm-hmm.
It's been being taken advantage of for decades, and any technology that you can bring in that is going to bring transparency, especially in the supply chain side, which is the second largest spend in healthcare, is absolutely needed. And there are significant opportunities there, and they're not going away. It's about 19 to 20% of our GDP, and it's growing.
Mm-hmm.
So those things exist. And when economic times are tough, you're always making garbage. You're always making waste.
Mm-hmm.
And people come to me and said, well, do you care about the administration and what they're going to do? I said, I don't really care who's there. I mean, from a business point of view.
Yep.
People are still going to get sick, and they're going to go to their doctors, they're going to go to the hospital, and they need products and services, and those need to be paid for, and somebody's going to pay for them. Either, the private payer section, Medicare, Medicaid, the government, or the individual. Somebody's going to pay for them. And if we can make access to those more cost effective, it's going to cut down the costs in healthcare, and it will give accessibility to more people. So I wouldn't change that at all. As a matter of fact, I would suggest to anybody who's looking to get in business, if they have some type of healthcare background or knowledge, that there are significant opportunities there. In the waste business, it's more of how can you do it more effectively, more efficiently, and it's not getting rid of the waste. That's a logistics business.
Yep.
So no, I wouldn't change it. I don't. The food industry, there's so many facets of it. I'm not educated there. In the death business, you will see that there have been significant roll-ups by institutional investment firms into the death business, the funeral business.
Mm-hmm.
They've been rolling these things up, and they're making a significant amount of money. You don't hear about it because people think it's kind of a morbid subject.
Yeah, I was going to say that.
Yeah, but it's absolutely there, and there's a lot of financial upside there.
Well, I think the you answered. We had a follow up question, which you went ahead and answered. If you believe that's still good, those are still hold true today. Which your logic behind that obviously is kind of foolproof. Like the way I've never heard somebody explain that like something so clearly. I think for like which industries you should go into, and then the death one. It is interesting how you mentioned it. It's a morbid topic, and you don't. I met a guy 3 or 4 years ago that had a software company called Kraken. I think he ended up exiting pretty big, and it was a software company for funeral homes and it was like you didn't really hear much about this guy. It was like a morbid topic, but I'm pretty sure the guy. I have to go double check, but I knew he exited, and I think he exited pretty large for the software he built called Kraken. And again, those aren't the. I think those are not the pretty industries, but those are also the ones that are going to be around forever.
Yeah, they don't change and you hit it right on the head. They're not pretty, okay? They're not fancy. They're not anything that people go, wow. You work in that industry. People say to me, well, how'd you do what you did? And I said, well, I was in garbage in healthcare. Now, healthcare, they kind of get. They look at me and say, garbage? And I go, yeah. Yeah, your trash is my cash. and they kind of laugh. And these aren't, by the way, inside those four verticals, gentlemen, the services component inside those four verticals are more recession proof or more economically insulated than the capital parts of it. Example, real quick, in the garbage business, if the amount of waste goes down because the manufacturers are producing less, you don't need as many containers, okay? You're going to get a higher degree of marginal utilization out of that container. So you might depreciate it now 7 years as opposed to 5. But you still have to pick that stuff up, okay? And that service of picking it up doesn't go away. And depending upon what type of waste you're dealing with, like in healthcare, the most regulated thing in all of healthcare is waste. Okay?
Yep.
And in medical waste in healthcare, it is extremely regulated. How much was generated per bed per day? When was it picked up inside the hospital? How long is it allowed to stay in the hospital holding area? Then it has to be picked up in a certain amount of time from the time it was generated. It's only allowed to be transported for a certain amount of time. Then it has to be processed and destroyed in a certain period of time, and then put in an ultimate place in the landfill. Those things are time sensitive, and they're services that aren't going to go away.
Yep.
So I think you get the idea. If you get in the services part of those four industries, you're better off than in the capital part of those four industries.
Makes sense. It's a very insightful take there as well.
Is that, I want to ask him, is that when you're getting into that, you're clearly an expert. Healthcare Waste Solutions was the company that you exited. Am I speaking correctly? Oh, one of the bigger ones.
I exited a whole bunch of them, but that one is the one we put in. We put in a total of $23 million and sold it for $247 million. 5 years later.
Not a bad ROI.
5 years later?
Yeah. Well, actually 6. Concept was 1 year, and then building it up, and then selling it, and then the Department of Justice approval took another 9 months. So I guess in total about 6.5 years.
So I want to ask you a question on that, because that time frame, that's the kind of stuff that you hear. Okay, I started this company. 6, 7, 8 years, whatever it was. That's a super short time frame to go from a $23 million investment to $250 million, right? And so,
yes.
One of the I guess my question would be is, how did you manage growing that quickly? Was it? I know you've mentioned people and money, but it's almost like it sounds like you'd have to be running with a fire under your ass to be able to manage that kind of growth that quickly.
Not really. Again, if you work backwards, like I told you or mentioned to you earlier, I knew I wanted. Where do you think the biggest amount of medical waste is? It's where the most people are, and where are the most people? New York, East Coast. I knew I wanted to go there, but I knew I couldn't start there. So I had to start in the Midwest to build out the processes, the technologies that we were building. People in the Midwest are a little bit more lenient about early stage companies. So it took about 2 years to build that up, proof it all out. Then I went to New York. And I walked in and said, here's what the value is. I knew we could replicate it. I knew people in New York are impatient. I knew they didn't like paying their bills on time. Knew all that stuff. So when we went there, we had 3 facilities before we went there, and had spent quite a bit of money on building a technology that managed things differently. And before I went to New York, I looked to buy a company, a medical waste company that was servicing in New York, but wasn't doing a very adequate job. And so I knew part of the plan was to go to the biggest market. I had to proof in a medium market to get ready for the large market in New York, New England, New Jersey, and the Mid-Atlantic. And I also knew to service that I'd have to have an incinerator. There were only 11 medical waste incinerators at the time approved. And so you pre-plan from out backwards, and I knew who I'd have to go buy. And I worked on 2 years of building that relationship and showed him the value. And instead of buying them, I merged in a factor with him that gave him a huge upside on the sale that he never would have gotten, and he understood it. And we went from the availability of processing about 100 tons a day of medical waste in a 24-month period to 875 tons a day. And when you control where the business is, I knew, and we were taking business away from the 2 largest companies in the industry, and that was the plan. I knew they'd want to get rid of us, but I had to go through New York to do it.
Right. You wanted to position yourself like they're getting too big. We gotta absorb them because they're taking too much of our business.
Exactly. And the last statement I'll make there, which I don't talk about often, is I also built relationships with some large institutional investing firms in New York, talking to them, telling them who I was, introducing myself, but not asking for any money. And they would say, well, you don't need any money. And I said, not right now, but maybe in the future. Well, a lot of those institutional houses, they like to build relationships. And if you have a good thing going, then once you have it going, then they want to get involved because they're only commodities money.
Mm-hmm.
And so I did that, and I knew right before I went to sell it, I had built these relationships in almost 5 years. I went back to New York, sat down with these firms, and had dinner with them. I'd meet with them about every 6 months just to say, gee, here's what we're doing. I met with you 6 months ago. We added this healthcare system, we added this, and they're going, man, do you need some money? And I'd say, no, I don't need any money, but, maybe in the future I will. So finally, when I knew I wanted to sell the company, I went and sat down with these guys individually and said, I'm ready to recapitalize my company. And they said, you are? And I said, yeah. And they said, well, what are you thinking about? And I said, I'm looking for $200 million. And they said, okay. Now remember, for 5 years, they've been hearing about my progressions.
Right.
You know what I mean? The company's progressions. And they always kept asking me, do you want money? Do you want money? I'd say, no, no, no. Now all of a sudden I look at them and I go, I'm thinking about recapping my company. Paying back my initial investors, giving them some upside, and growing the business. I need to recap. How much you thinking about? $200 million. I never had any intention of recapping that company, but I knew as soon as I went to these investment houses and told them that I was looking at a recap, word would get out on the street to the 2 biggest players that Joe Mayernick was looking to go out and get $200 million, and with $20 million, he's kicking our ass, taking market share. We can't let this guy have $200 million because we're going to lose more market share. So what I did by using that $200 million number, fellas, was I set the floor. So because I knew these two companies would find out I was looking for $200 million, and they then would know that if they wanted to buy, the floor was going to be $200 million.
That's the minimum. That's the minimum you. Yeah, they're like, okay, he's trying to go out and get 200 million. We can't offer him any less than that.
Exactly. And then they bid against each other, and then we settled in one deal, and that was it.
That's so slick.
So you have to think, like I said, how you want to exit. And I knew to exit, I'd have to raise my own money, have to use my own money, have to build out a pilot in the Midwest, and then move it towards New York, New England, the Mid-Atlantic, and then I'd have to simultaneously build relationships with investment people in New York.
Because you had to prime buyers, basically, right? You had to make sure that it would get back to them. So you were, and some people might call that manipulation. I just call that good business. You're building real relationships, but in business, there's always a mutual benefit to both. So you're building good relationships, and you're also saying, hey, I know that these relationships will help me get to where I want to go too.
Right, absolutely. And then after we sold the business, one of those firms actually two of them came to me and said, hey, will you build a national medical waste business? And what would it take? And I said, well, I know what it'll take, but I can't do it. I have a non-compete. And they said, well, what would it take? So I gave them an outline, and one of them came back and said, well, we'll fund you up to $1 billion to follow your strategic plan to build another national medical waste company, because there was only one that was traded publicly, and their stock was trading at $140 a share. And the market, even today, still today, 10 years later, is still looking to bring to the market a nationally traded medical waste company, because there's only one today that exists. And it's not a fancy industry, but it's a very profitable industry. And so you have to look at all the levers, is my point to you. It's just not the product or the technology you fall in love with. You have to take a look at that holistic picture. What kind of impact does this product or technology make? And how does the market exist today? How can I, in fact, exact change in the market, and then work from what I want to do with the company and what timeline, and work backwards. And there are several different moving parts. And one is money, and one is access to money, utilization of relationships in the financial area. The other one is operational expertise, making sure that you can produce and provide what you say you can, and how you're differentiating yourself. And so you're pulling 4 or 5 different levers at one time. And you asked earlier, and I think the reason that most companies don't succeed is not that they don't have a good product or technology or concept. They don't look at the whole overarching holistic approach of all the things you have to do besides having a great product or a technology. There are a lot of moving parts in building a business successfully or progressively and selling it. And that really comes from experience and getting your butt kicked a few times. But
it almost sounds like it's an art. It almost sounds like it's an art form, Joe, to a degree. I mean,
kind of is.
Finding the balance between, because as you hear as like entrepreneurs, especially younger ones, and if you follow like big media, right, TechCrunch, all these big, and Crunchbase, and all the news that's being shared, that you're not hearing all the other stories. You're just hearing what the media outlets want you to hear, which is this company started here and they moved quick, they did this and this. And I think as entrepreneurs and just business professionals in general, we're kind of pushed to move fast. And it's move fast, but also like have some strategy. Like you might have a good product, but if you don't know what the market's going to yield, if you don't know who your targets are going to be, if you don't know if you want to exit or if you want to make it a lifestyle company, if you don't have these things in place, you could have the best product in the world and it's never going to go anywhere.
You hit it right on the head, and it's very astute of you. There are a lot of great products and ideas, I mean great ones, that have never been implemented out there because the people that came up with the concepts and ideas didn't know how to bring it to market. And therefore, there are a lot of things that could be very helpful that, we don't utilize. And that's why, and I'm sure you guys know this, a lot of the technologies and some of the cutting edge products come from governmental programs. And when you think about that, how is that possible? Well, they have, in a lot of cases, unlimited funding, and they can take as much time as they want. For example, a company by the name of Corning that I consulted to years ago, that people knew them for their dish plates, their dishware, all right? And not so much today because of the way the market changed. But where I'm going with this is they had dishware that was the top dishware, flatware in the United States and probably in the world for a while. And that product was not designed as dishware. They were building the ceramic plates for the space shuttle. And as a result of building those plates that took up huge amounts of heat resistance on the re-entry into the Earth for the space shuttle, one of their product guys said, "Well, gee, we could take this same application and make dinnerware plates that you could put in the oven and they would never crack." And that's how Corning flatware was invented. Not because they were looking to make, you know what I mean,
right,
dinnerware that high heat resistance. They had a product that they built for the ceramic tiles for the space shuttle. And somebody sat there and said, "You know what, we could probably take that and make it into dinnerware, and we could say you can put it into your oven and heat it up to 600 and it won't crack." That's how that was created. And there are a lot of other things that we use today as consumers that were created in governmental or for governmental programs. So anyway, I know our time's about up here, so any other questions?
Yeah, real quick, just trying to get as much juice out of you as we can. Kind of going to take this in a slightly different direction, but it's still related. We've seen plenty of stories of successful businessmen and women that have amassed great fortunes. How do you prevent your children or future generations from, that sense of entitlement?
That's the best question you've asked today. You've asked good questions, but that's the best one. I know we have about 7 minutes. I'll probably take it all up.
You can run over if you want. We're trying to be conscious of your time.
Yeah. Okay. That is an absolutely penetrating question. Years ago, like when you're young guys coming out of school and you kind of interact with each other, and we all kind of go our separate ways, and a bunch of us were very progressive in what we did. And several of the guys ended up becoming CEOs of Fortune 50 companies, Fortune 100 companies, some of us in an entrepreneurial event. And we would get together about once a year, maybe twice a year. Mm-hmm. And always the subject would come up of what you just brought up, and would sit around and say, "Gee, You have to teach your kids the basic fundamentals of honesty, integrity, the basic value sets. Those things you have to teach them, and they have until they're about 16 or 18, and then they go out in the world and see if they really work or not. But you're talking about the economic point of view here, and it's always been a challenge. For example, and this story resonates with most of my counterparts. I can remember when I was a kid, we came from very humble beginnings. My mom and dad worked. My dad didn't even have a high school education. Eventually got his GED. But I started working when I was 11, I think.
Wow.
And I played baseball, and I had to work for 2 years to get my first Mickey Mantle Rawlings baseball glove. 2 years I worked for that.
I bet you that's worth something if you still have it.
I still have it.
Nice.
So when I got older and I was working, and we had a son, I said to myself, you know what? I want to make sure he gets the best ball glove there is out there. So I bought it for him.
Mm-hmm.
And by the time he was 16, he and I were playing in the father-son golf tournament at Pebble Beach, walking down the 18th fairway, playing at Pebble Beach. And I thought that was great.
Mm-hmm.
Not so great. And what we did, a bunch of us that came from humble beginnings, was we empowered our children with economic access that we didn't have, that we had to work for. And if I had to do it all over again, and we've been fortunate, our 3 children have worked out fine. 2 of them worked in our businesses, but I would have them working from the time they were 12 or 13 in some type of job to teach them the value of hard work, ethics, the economic impact. And I think if you do that at an early age, when you've amassed quite a few dollars, you have a higher degree of comfort that they're not going to go out and buy Ferraris and blow the money.
Mm-hmm.
They're going to appreciate the value of that, and they're going to be good stewards of what has left to them.
Well, they're gonna, yeah, that's huge. They're gonna use it wisely, almost.
Correct. But if you're used to giving them things, which that was part of the challenge that my associates and I had, we thought we were doing the right thing for them. We weren't doing the right thing for them. It was more the right thing for us.
Good intentions, but bad outcomes, essentially, right?
Yeah, correct. Now, fortunately, my kids don't. They're all multimillionaires now because of the way we set up their trust, but you wouldn't know they had 5 cents, and you don't see them spending money. They work up the basic facts, but it's something that anybody that's really progressive, that's going to build a large, family foundation, has to be very sensitive to. And the earlier you are sensitive to it, the better off you are, because if not, in estate planning, you try to manage from the grave. And, that's not always helpful. And unfortunately, I see a lot of my contemporaries who have passed away where the kids are fighting over money.
Mm-hmm.
They're fighting over the spoils of their father's or mother's hard work. And I think some of my buddies would be turning over in their grave if they knew that the things that they had built are now being argued over and tearing their children apart.
Mm.
And I see that So, I try to manage from the grave, from the estate point of view, but you can only manage so much, and you can put parameters and restrictions on it, but it is a problem. And each individual has to handle that, and they handle it differently.
Sure.
But it is problematic because you can imagine when you're building businesses, back to the element of time. Time's your most precious commodity. You only have so much time. So if you have 100 hours in the week, you're building businesses and you're taking 60, 70 hours a week, build those businesses or build your career, that only leaves 10 to 30 hours for your family.
Mm-hmm.
And so this work-life balance of, how do you appropriate those things? It's something that and there's no manual on parenting either.
I was about to say there's no easy answer to this.
No, I'm just listening here, Joe, because I've got an 8.5-year-old and now my youngest is 10 months old, so my ears are perked up, just listening to everything you're saying right now. I mean, this is priceless knowledge.
But it's your work balance of life, and generally when you're really going out there, people, when you come out of school, generally you have to work for money. That's your motivation. Mm-hmm. And you heard me say it on that other interview. You work for money, and then the people that are really pretty good, they want responsibility for the money. So they want to seek responsibility. They ironically end up making some more money than the ones that are really good. They want authority for the responsibility they have. They end up getting authority for the responsibility. They end up making more money.
Mm-hmm.
And even though money was the initial motivator, you now see it's not the motivator. And then you eventually seek a position of power, and power is where you make policy. And that's the most difficult position, because now when you're making policy and you're walking the bedroom floors at 2 a.m, you have your executive teams giving you their input. I think we ought to do this. I think we ought to do this. I think we ought to do that. In a lot of cases, it's mostly self-ingratiating. So you have to see through that. And then when you make policy, you have to you're really going to do it the right way. You have to engage down and think, how does it affect the janitors in the company? Because the reality is your executive vice presidents really don't run the company.
No.
People that execute are the people on the ground floor. So when you change these policies, how does it affect them and their families? And those things take a lot of time, effort to make that money, and therefore your time allocation is more leveraged not to your family, but to the businesses or your career. But in your mind, you justify that by saying, I'm doing this for the benefit of my family. When in reality, you're in many cases taking away from the basic fundamental values of the family, because you aren't there spending time, mentoring, teaching, and so forth. You're building a business where you think the economics will take care of the family. And what you learn in the rearview mirror is, if you're really smart enough, you really become sensitive to that balance between family and business. And most of us have not done that well, or did that well. Some of my associates sit there and say, well, they're far better off than they would have been if I haven't done that. I look at it and say, well, it's easy to say, but the reality is what's the measurement of the value of the children that we brought in and fostered and brought along? Mm-hmm. And we're going to go into the dust here soon. We're going to leave them with a bunch of money. What are they going to do with it? what type of value are they going to move forward with it? And that's a question that continues to be asked all the time, and
That's deep.
it's not an easy answer.
That's deep. No, there's probably not one answer to it too. It's a combination of things, but like you said, when you're gone, the economic value you've left for your children and grandchildren and so on and family members, it's going to be, my opinion is that a big part of how that's going to be used is the value that you've provided them that was not economic value. That was, things you taught them, things you did with them, experiences you gave them. That's going to help drive what they do with the money. And so I think that's the balancing act there as a parent. And obviously when you have the kind of wealth that you've accumulated, those questions, for me sitting here at 28, I'm making a decent living, but I don't have to answer those questions right now. I'm just thinking about what's the next big thing for me. Somebody like you, those are bigger questions when you've got that kind of wealth. You think about that a lot more. Like, I don't want I saw Tom Brady, and then then we'll wrap this up. I saw Tom Brady. They did an article the other day, and he's like, I'm trying to teach my kids that, like, hey, we do a lot of nice things, and this is great, but this isn't like the real world. Like, a lot of people don't get to do this stuff. And how do I teach my kids that there's value? There's a lot of value and intangibles to living the normal life, and that not everybody gets this. And so it's just an interesting dynamic that I don't struggle with personally this day in my life, but you obviously and your associates where you're at in your stage, it's something you've clearly got to think about a lot.
Okay, well, it's been a very interesting interaction. Some of these subject matters I haven't talked about in quite a while, so it's my hat's off to you for asking some of these provocative questions, other than pure economics, how do you build a business and so forth. You always have to infuse what I'll term to be the family side of people, because what do you really work for? At the end of the day, what do you work for? You work to provide a better life for yourself, your family, and is there a real value that you're building there outside of a bank account? So my hat's off to you for asking those questions. Thanks a lot for the opportunity to chat with you guys, and all the best to you.
Thanks, Joe.
Thank you so much, Joe. Really appreciate it. God bless.